Hey guys, welcome to the workshop. Today we have a special topic. It's not knives. We're going to be talking broadheads. My name is Matt Elliott. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here. They typically don't let me in any videos, but because I'm an avid hunter and bow hunter, I've got a lot of experience with a lot of different types of broadheads and attempts at sharpening over the years.
Steve Baker, I'm product line manager. Been sharpening for a long time and also an avid bow hunter, so sharpening broadheads is an important aspect of it. So we're going to show you a few little tips and tricks, what to do, what not to do, and let's go from there.
One important thing to note here is that we make knife sharpeners, not broadhead sharpeners. There are companies that make broadhead specific sharpeners. We do have some different sharpeners that will work to sharpen certain broadheads. It's important when you're thinking about sharpening a broadhead that you match the sharpening device you're using to the broadhead. You could even go as far as to decide what sharpener you like to use to get your broadhead sharp and then select your broadhead based on that. I would start with the broadhead that you want to shoot and then find a sharpener to match it. There are many different types of broadheads, like a giant range. Some of them are sharpenable, some of them are not. Some of them that are sharpenable are not worth sharpening. I personally don't shoot broadheads that you need to sharpen. I shoot two different types, and we'll go through those first. These are the ones you don't need to sharpen. The first of those is what's known as a mechanical broadhead. These have blades that are tucked up in different ways inside of the head, and when it hits the target, the blades expand. The benefit to these is that they fly very well because they're super aerodynamic, and then you get a large cut diameter. That being said, they are not overly tough. So once you shoot these through a target, you either need to replace the blades, or basically it's done after one time you've shot them. And when I talk about targets here, you don't shoot these into like regular targets. You'd just go down to the range and shoot. You would shoot what's known as a field point, and then you shoot these at animals. So what we're really talking about here is primarily what you do with a dull broadhead after you've either shot it at an animal or shot it into a target. And when we're talking mechanicals, typically you wouldn't shoot these into your archery targets. You use these to kill things. There are many different types. Yeah, like this one here, the front hits the target and then it pushes the blades out. This here, it goes in, and then once these little wing blades hit the target, the blades expand. The benefit to these is you get a larger cutting diameter and a better flight path, but they're not as strong. The next type, these are fixed blades, not mechanical, so there's nothing that moves after you hit the target, but these actually have blades that you can replace. So you don't need to sharpen these. This is the other type I like to shoot for this very reason. You don't need to sharpen these blades. Once they're dull, you just pull the blades out, put new blades in, and you're back to sharp. I'm going to let Steve here, who's the real expert on sharpening, cover the other types of broadheads, which are the types of fixed blades that are worth sharpening.
So you got a few different kinds here. You have single bevel, you have two blade, you have three blade. One thing is when you're sharpening a broadhead, one that we consider sharpenable, like any one of these here, as you're sharpening them, it's the same process as when you're sharpening a knife. You're still going to want to match that angle. You're still going to want to remove material, create a burr, and then go to the back side of that. If it's double bevel here, you would sharpen both sides. On a single bevel, you're going to create the burr on here, and then we're just going to come back in and hone off that burr that we create on there. So it's very similar to a knife. It's just different geometry, and you have to kind of use the sharpeners a little bit different. And there's also three blades. These are probably the easiest to try to touch up, and we'll get to those here in just a moment. Depending on the sharpener that you have and the way you want to sharpen them, we can use regular bench stones to be able to hold that angle, match the angle on it, and run down very similar to like you would do with a knife. Just be careful because you got another edge facing towards you. Run through a progression of abrasives depending on the condition of them. Broadheads generally, they're not going to see a huge amount of damage. I mean, we hopefully shoot them through an animal, and that's about the worst thing they're going to see, maybe a little bit of dirt. So I tend to start on a finer abrasive, somewhere around a 600, then I'll go to the ceramic hone, and then onto a leather strop. Another way we can do this is, especially with these single bevels, is the precision adjust works pretty well on these. So similar to a knife, we're going to place the broadhead in there. I like to try to find a feature on here that I can look at on the broadhead, mount it to the corner of the jaw, so when I flip this broadhead over to do the opposite side, I get it in the exact same position, so I can create the exact same geometry on the other side. Tighten that down, mount it. Since we don't know what the angle is and I want to match it, we're going to look from the side, and you'll have a larger bevel on here, so it's a lot easier to see than it would be on a knife. And then we're just going to make slight adjustments to that until we're actually coming in contact with the cutting edge on it.
Steve, are you trying to make sure that the abrasive surface is matching the entire bevel, or are you going a little farther, a little more extreme of an angle, so that you're ensuring that the abrasive is actually contacting the final edge of the knife or the blade of the broadhead?
I'll try to kick it up just a little bit to make sure I'm actually hitting that bevel, because I don't know what the geometry of this is, whether or not they're flat ground, hollow ground. This one appears to have a little bit of a hollow grind to it, so I'll move it up just a little bit to where I can see just a tiny bit of light towards the back of the bevel, so I know I'm coming in contact with the cutting edge. And the nice thing about doing a single bevel on here is now you can write down, what broadhead you have, what angle you actually sharpened it to. Mm-hmm. So if you do shoot it into a target, practicing it, trying to dial your bow in to get proper arrow flight, when you want to come back in and touch up those test broadheads, now you can go right back to that same angle and get them touched up really quickly.
That is one important thing to note. Like you definitely, if you're planning on hunting with arrows, you should always shoot your broadheads on the arrow into the targets before you go hunting, to ensure that each arrow you're planning to shoot is flying true. Because depending on the balance of the arrow and whether or not it's assembled well, if the harmonic balance is off, the aerodynamics are off, and it may not actually hit where you're aiming. So even a mechanical, you can put a lockdown screw in, and then it won't actually actuate the mechanism when you fire it into a target. They're just not quite as robust as some of the other fixed blades. So like the advantage to the fixed blade broadheads is they're tougher, so you can shoot them more frequently into your targets, where these, for me at least, they've got small wings on them, and eventually those are going to bend. So what I try to do here is just shoot them a couple of times to make sure that the arrows are hitting the right spot, where with some of these fixed blades you can use them over and over again and then go through the sharpening process.
Back to the single bevel. Once we create that burr on the back side of this, just like we would do for a knife, we'll want to take this back out. You'll end up removing it out of it. Well, you actually don't have to if you don't want to. But at this point, I would take a leather strop and just very lightly come back in, take that burr that we created off with that leather strop. You'll end up with a nice hair shaving edge on them. So the single bevels are some of the easiest ones out there to sharpen.
They get sharper than other broadheads do. They're not as sharp, frankly, as like the replaceable blade, fixed blades. Those are effectively razor blades, which is the same as what comes out of a mechanical. Those are also effectively razor blades. But the single bevels, and even some of the broader double bevels, you're gonna get a sharper edge than you will with one of these 3-bladed broadheads. Some
of these will have what's called a bleeder. These little tiny blades off to the side. You have your main broadhead here. Again, this is another single bevel. And you have these little bleeders on here. It's another one you can get really sharp, but when you try to come in and sharpen it, even on a flat stone, like our GFS, those bleeders are going to get in the way before you can match that angle. So these will generally have a little screw in here. You pull that screw out, the main blade will come out, the bleeders will come out, so you have those that you can hold separately while you're sharpening them. And then you can actually clamp this main part of the broadhead, the main blade, in here to be able to sharpen them. The bleeders are a real challenge because they're tiny. Those I will place them on a a rigid stone, use my finger to make sure that that's flat, and then just very lightly try to pull back on it. Again, just be careful because you're dealing with two blades and they're sharp. When we get into, it's another single bevel, but just a little bit different geometry. We have that big recurve in there. This is not going to sharpen well on a flat stone. So anything like a bench stone or the small stone on the precision adjust just is not going to sharpen well. This is where something like the GFS can come in well or handy, because you can turn this around to the coarse side of the ceramic here, and this is a little bit more on you to be able to hold the correct angle. What we do is come in and hold, match that angle, and then lightly make passes up that broadhead. As you do that, you'll start creating that little burr there. We can go back over to the fine side. A few strokes there, and now we're going to flip this back over, because now we've created a burr on that back side. You want to come in at a very shallow angle and just remove that burr. Yep, and then you're back to a nice sharp blade on them. It's just a little bit different, because now it's up to you to actually make those motions rather than having a fixtured system hold those for you.
The broadheads are inherently sharp, right? You got razor blades and knife blades and all sorts of stuff like flying around all over the place. How would you suggest holding on to these well if you're going to hand sharpen? You know, like, I mean, it's one thing if you can clamp it, but in the freehand setup, I see you've got a little arrow shaft there. Yeah,
this was one of my old arrows that took a bad turn. Anyway, broke it, so I just cut off the end of it. It's carbon arrow, so they tend to fray. I just wrap a little tape over the top of it because I don't like carbon splinters. I glued another insert into it, and then I'll just screw that onto it. And now that gives me a nice handle up here. It keeps my hand away from the cutting edge. So if you're going to use any one of these on a flat stone, you got something that you can hang on to, and it gives you a nice purchase on that. And just helps you hold on to it so you're not going to worry about cutting yourself. One thing I would like to show on this is with our guided field sharpener, we call it the GFS, is the diamond plates on here are removable. So you can take those off. Got your instructions rolled up on the inside. And we have broadhead wrenches in here. So if you need a tool to help get a stuck broadhead off or put one back on, they're built in, so you can do 2 and 4 blade, 3 blade, and we also have the pieces here. So if you have, where'd it go? These guys that are locked on by the chisel tip, you can actually get a hold of that and unscrew it also, because using a wrench rather than trying to hang on to a sharp or semi-sharp blade is always a bit safer.
It is nice for getting that extra little turn on there.
Yeah. Well, that, and if you've had one on there for a while, you've shot it into a target a couple of times, depending on the rotation of the arrow and stuff, it might have tightened up.
Yeah.
I don't like hanging onto a sharp broadhead and trying to reef that thing off. It's a great way to open up your finger a little bit.
It's not a reason to buy a GFS, but it's kind of a cool bonus feature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That moves us into 3-blade broadheads. These are probably one of the easiest to sharpen out there, being that the 3 blades actually, each blade has 2 sides to it. Each one of those creates a flat plane. So the surface on this cutting edge here is actually on the same plane as the cutting surface over here. So it's actually a flat surface here, here, and here. So if we want to sharpen these, we can come in, just lay them flat on that stone. And you'll just push them along, rotate it over to do the second side. And again, you can start with the diamond if it's in rough shape. Typically a brand new broadhead, I come in just on the ceramic and I'll do nice light strokes. And once I get that touched up, and I'll Sharpie the edges on all 3 of them, so I know that I've removed enough material to where I've got, back down to a new edge here.
Yeah, but what is that? What do you mean Sharpie the edges?
Take a Sharpie marker and just color the cutting edges in so they're black. just like the Sharpie trick we do with
Color the whole
color
the whole face of the
whole cutting edge
Okay.
all the way up to the tip and down the other side, and do that on all three. Do a couple strokes, switch over to the next side. Do a couple strokes, switch over to the next side. Keep doing that until you've removed all the black on there. That way you know all three of them are down to a new edge. And you want to do the same amount of work on each side. It's important, just like we say with knives, to keep them symmetrical. You want to do the same amount of work on each side, especially something like a single bevel. If you remove a lot more material, change the geometry drastically from side to side, that could affect your arrow flight. And we all want our arrows to hit where we're aiming.
So like something else to note about a fixed blade broadhead is that because of the way these fixed 3 blades work, you can't get as finite an edge angle on them as you can on something like this. I think this is a kudu point, on a single bevel, especially not a fixed 2-blade single bevel like this. Even a double bevel like this, you're not going to get quite as fine an edge on as you will on a single bevel. But these, you really are going to wind up with a more obtuse edge angle on them. The issue you run into with that is it doesn't make quite as slicey or clean a cut, which allows the blood to coagulate more easily through the wound channel. And of course, we're trying to kill animals here, and do it as quickly as possible. And we also, like, one of the ways we find an animal is through blood trailing. And so if your wound channel ends up closing up because you didn't make as slicey a cut, and I think it's like the hemoglobins in the blood can't coagulate as well on something like this, so you end up with more blood that just continues to come out, where here the wound will cauterize more easily. So even on an effective kill shot, oftentimes you wind up with a lighter blood trail, or one that even stops. Not saying that it won't on the others. I've definitely shot animals with other types of broadheads, razor blade broadheads, mechanicals, and have not had great blood trails, but on these, you're more likely to have less of a blood trail eventually because of the coagulation effect of not having as sharp a blade, not having as slicey or clean a cut. And as a result, there's potentially more of a likelihood that you won't find an animal that you shoot with one of these. So, you have to make the decision for yourself. These have their own advantages. They're very tough. Oftentimes they fly really well. They just aren't quite as sharp. And so, like, personally, I want to shoot something that's as sharp as possible. It gives me a balance between toughness, sharpness, large wound channels, and good flight path. And these just don't give you quite the same performance once you shoot it through an animal with regards to bloodletting.
So just to finish these off, once you come off of the ceramic, you can also take a leather strop and do basically the exact same thing, except now we're just going to pull backwards. Because as he mentioned, the inclusive angle on these is quite a bit wider than what you're going to see on any of the replaceables or the single bevels. So getting these as sharp as we can, being as responsible as we can as hunters to make sure that we get clean kills. So let's get the best that we can out of our broadheads. So a few strops on there, you can actually get them fairly sharp. Just not as sharp as what we're going to see on like replaceable blades and some of the single bevels. You can do a lot more work on. So we looked at a couple different sharpeners here on how we can sharpen these. Not everybody has a rod and clamp system or a precision adjust or bench stones. We can still sharpen these things just on regular field hones, and most people will have some sort of a knife sharpener. The practice is the same. So as we're sharpening, say, even these 3-blade, we can totally do that on a GFS, just using it as we had talked about before. The strop's a little smaller, so you can still come in, strop one side at a time. So these are still really effective. You just have to figure out how it works best for you, given the broadhead that you're actually trying to sharpen. And even down to something with small stones, you can still sharpen on them. It's just a little bit different. So we're not quite wide enough to sharpen like we did on the broadhead or on the bench stone, pushing straight forward. So we can actually lay these down and just make a flat pass all the way across. And then come back up and do the same thing on the ceramic. So a lot of this It's just figuring out the best way for you to sharpen. Like Matt mentioned in the very beginning, we're a knife sharpening company. We don't have anything specific we don't have a specific broadhead sharpener. So there's always a bit of a compromise when you're using something that was designed for one thing and trying to do something else with it. But it's all totally possible. I mean, these are all capable of sharpening them. It just takes a little bit of ingenuity from you, the person doing the actual sharpening. And even down to some of the replaceable blades. If you really want to get in there, and you remove these, oftentimes they're super small. Figure out something to hang on to them. And if you can match the angle and if you're happy with what you're doing, you can come back in and touch these up. It's just, they're replaceable for a reason. So you don't have to go through and do that. So
yeah, just don't do that. It's nice advice.
It's the best way, yeah.
Don't do it. Just
you
pull $20 out of your pocket and go buy more replaceable blades for your replaceable blade broadheads, or don't shoot replaceable blade broadheads.
That's good advice.
Yeah. I think that you already said it, but the real choice here to be made is like a personal decision. You just make sure that whatever you're shooting, it's as sharp as possible the moment you shoot that at whatever this live target is. Because at the end of the day here, the objective is to kill an animal, harvest the meat, put the horns up on the wall like we have here in the workshop. And all that's great. You don't want to turn what could have been a really awesome day into a crummy one because you didn't maintain your gear. Yeah, well, thanks for joining us in the workshop today, and let us know down in the comments below what you think, how dumb we are, how wrong we are, how much you love us, any of that stuff. Argue amongst yourselves about like which types of broadheads are the best. We're not here to give you advice one way or the other. Just want to make sure to give you everything we can so that you can have the most successful day possible out in the field. Thanks.
Also like to know, what broadheads are you guys shooting? Let us know in the comments, and if you have some great trick for sharpening them, share that with us and the rest of the audience.
Don't try to come back over the top of me. I thought I was supposed to be closing this out.
Go ahead.
Bye.